So, hello everyone. Welcome to this R&D session powered by New and P&OD, our People and Organizational Development Global Unit. We hope you enjoyed the video. This was a campaign launched by EDP called Rebels for Change to test whether, through the eyes of children, there are jobs for women and men. If in one end, children don't see reasons for differences, assigning 50% of the objects to both Sarah and Mark, because this is what it should be. On the other hand, most of the technical or scientifically related objects were associated to Mark. So we can see that as we grow up, we are being formatted to what society presents to us as normal standards, such as an engineering being perceived first and foremost in a male role and not in a female role. So that's why we are here today. 8th of March marks another International Women's Day around the globe. And this important day celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women worldwide, and also marks a call to action for accelerating gender diversity and equality. As EDP is playing a big role to establish gender equality and equity, we want to celebrate this International Women's Day, which this year has the official theme of Embrace Equity.
So as we know that one of the fields that maintain high standards of gender equality is the field of STEM, so social sciences, technology, engineer, and mathematics. So this year, EDP's P&OD joined EDP New R&D to promote a joint webinar dedicated to this challenging topic. So P&OD, People and Organizational Development Global Unit, it's kind of a fancy name, but it's the team at EDP that works towards all people-related topics, including how we position ourselves as a diverse and inclusive company for all. So being a diverse and inclusive company comprehends several things. One is clearly how we see gender, people with disabilities, generations, cultures, among so many other characteristics, and proportionately represented within our workforce. So representation somehow means, on the first instance, equal access to opportunities, which then lead to how we develop and support people to thrive within their professional careers. But I'm sure Bernardo will guide you through some more facts in a while. And then presenting also the EDP New, which is EDP Group's Research and Development Center, is totally oriented towards STEM areas, being a fundamental ally with EDP Group and its commitment to women in STEM and female representation. So as a curiosity, today is our 30th session, R&D session, but it also represents the percentage that EDP committed itself and aims to achieve a female representation by 2025 globally and also in leadership positions. So during the next hour, we will be talking with 4 amazing women, STEM professionals at EDP, who will provide us with a better insight of what it's like to be a woman in STEM. So let us just remind you that while this roundtable session is on, there will be an open chat to share any questions or comments, so feel free to use the chat. And we will save some time at the end to answer your questions. Also, this talk will be in English, as we already can see, but feel free also to go to the settings and to use the live captions available in multi-languages. So it's now time to give the word to our moderator of today's session, Bernardo. Thank you for taking up this challenge, and the floor is yours.
So thanks a lot for having me on this event. So here we have some of the facts from the Global Gender Gap Report 2022 from the World Economic Forum. The global gender gap has been closed by 68.1% at the current rate of progress. It will take 132 years to reach full parity. Women make up only 22% of artificial intelligence workers globally. A global analysis of 133 artificial intelligence systems across industries found that only 44.2%, not only, but a lot, 44.2% demonstrate gender bias. A survey of women journalists from 125 countries found 73% had suffered online violence in the course of their work. As United Nations points out, today, women underrepresentation in STEM education and careers remains a major barrier to their participation in tech design and governance. It is in this context that today we have with us 4 STEM women professionals from EDP that will share their testimonies. Why being a woman in STEM? What are the biggest challenges they went through to get where they are now? And what factors help these women in STEAM to grow and develop as professionals? These are some of the questions we will try to give the answer today. With no further delays, I welcome Gisela, Anna, Faye, and Mariana. Gisela Mendes is currently the head of RES, Integration and Flexibility at EDP New, and she has been working in national and European funded projects related to the energy storage, renewable energy, or smart cities, for example. Ana Carvalho is a project manager and R&D engineer at EDP New, working in RES integration and flexibility projects founded by the European Commission. Fei Li is a senior associate on the global procurement team with 9 years of supply chain and procurement experience. She currently leads EDPR's US solar model procurement strategy. And Mariana Curry started her career at EDP Brazil on 2022 as an electrical engineer, and she's currently in the Integrated Operations Center team. So welcome all of you, our 4 girls for today roundtable. And to start our conversation, this is a question to all of you. One of the major criticisms of STEM has to do with the gender disparity in the students who graduate with STEM degrees. To all of you, how and why did you choose this path? And I also would like to know if you ever thought of not following this STEM path or having some fears and doubts just because of being a woman. So I don't know who would like to start.
Maria can start. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here once again in this R&D sessions powered by EDP New, this time with the collaboration of EDP's P&OD. So I would say that my path was very smooth. I always liked to play with numbers. Math was my favorite topic in school until the day I started having physics classes. And it was very excited for me because I can use mathematical formulations to describe and to explain physical phenomena. So when I applied to the university, it was very clear to me that I would like to be a physics engineer. On one hand, because I love physics and math, and on the other hand, because I thought that engineer would give me a wider range of opportunities and competencies for my future professional life rather than theoretical physics. So I thought it was the right combination, physics engineer. I remember that by that time I discussed a bit with my parents and their suggestions were actually around which engineer course would be the best for me. I remember my father was not very convincing with my choice of physics because it may not be very good here in Portugal. He preferred more like mechanical or chemistry or electrotechnical. But the engineer part or the STEM option has never been questioned. And in the end, I applied to all physics engineer courses in Portugal. I was very keen to follow this path. Maybe I could say that I have luck to be born and raised in a STEM family, let's say, because my mom is a math professor, my father is an engineer. So there were no constraints for me to pursue a career on these topics. Actually, it was precisely the opposite. Everybody supports me a lot and they were very happy with my choices. I think it will be strange if I choose humanities or so. So actually, this was very natural for my family, for my friends. So regarding your second question of not following a STEM path because of being a woman, the short answer is a big no. Maybe I've been lucky enough for not having experienced some extreme situation that make me hesitate on going forward with my career, but probably because it's also very clear to myself what my drivers and beliefs are. So to be very honest, it never crossed my mind such a thing of changing my career or having some doubts because I'm a woman. No way.
Mm-hmm. And passing the word to Faye and using Gisela words, STEM, it represents some kind of fear to you. It was a very natural choice because you are from another reality, you are from the States. So tell me about you, Faye.
Yeah, thanks, Bernardo. So one, I think thanks for having me. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. So I was born and raised here in the US, but my parents immigrated from China. So I think maybe my family dynamic is a little bit different. But I was very, very lucky. I think the biggest influence on me definitely has been my family. I think similar to Gisela, always loved math and science growing up. I had opportunities in high school when my parents pushed me to take like STEM camps in the summer. So here in the US, it's common to go to like a camp in the summer for a couple weeks to study something or to to get to kind of like focus, make friends, get away from your family. And so I think in those experiences, I was able to attend like women in STEM camps that kind of gave me maybe some of the confidence or the experience of like what it's like to work with mathematicians or scientists or on the technical side. Ultimately, I chose to not major in STEM. I mean, I have an economics and environmental studies degree, and then I did want to work in energy. I've known my entire life that I've wanted to work in energy, but I think the ability to understand the technical side that the STEM training has given me has allowed me to be successful in a procurement role throughout my career. Have I faced challenges as a female? Yes, I would say for sure, and I'm happy to share about those maybe a little bit later on. But I think that the biggest influence for me has definitely been my family.
Mariana, and about the Brazilian reality, STEM still being a challenge for women in Brazil, or is very natural as for the boys?
For me, it was very natural. I knew I would be an engineer or a scientist since I was a kid, and my family I always had the support of my family. But I think most of women, especially in Brazil, we have this stigma that we don't see a lot of leadership, women in leadership seats, especially in STEM careers. So the lack of representation tends to make us think that maybe we have to work double as hard as a man to achieve the same results and respect. So it is a challenge, but I see that in the last years we have developed a lot in the environment, especially in the STEM careers for women. And for me, it was natural. But in general, I think that's a lot of improvement that has to be made for us to be okay with this path.
Mm-hmm. And when you access your university studies, did you feel this disparity between boys and girls in STEM graduations and during your academic path?
A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like 80% was men. So you expect
actually, Bernardo, it's interesting that you mention universities because I actually have a funny story, funny, more or less kind of sad story about getting into university. And I think it's interesting that we're talking, all of us, we said that, and my experience is also very similar to every one of yours, that it was very natural to join engineering. My family was also very engineering oriented, but then when I joined into university, there was this kind of game that people played in in my course. So I did electrical engineering in Instituto Superior Técnico, which is one of the biggest engineering universities here in Portugal. And every year people play this betting game, which is if in the following year there will be more women joining the course or more men called João. Exactly, João or girl. Exactly. So I see some people from the course here. So
I think
for
Francie
example,
should play that game too.
exactly. In the year where I joined the course, we were 30 women, and I think there was around like 40 something guys named João. So so there it's obvious, although we're here, it was natural for us to join engineering. I think that's not, and I mean the numbers show that that's not the usual thing that happens. So there's a lot of disparity, and it's not in the general population. It's not natural for girls to go to STEM careers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And being a girl or a woman never impact your confidence as student and during your early days as a professional.
Oh, for me, I don't know what is your experience, but for me, it did, and I had a lot of experiences where I felt that people didn't think that I was as good as the male person who I was working with. It happened quite often, and it's just something that education needs to, well, we need to work at as a society. But I did face a lot of those situations, and even now in my professional career, um, there is a lot of this thing called imposter syndrome, and actually there is statistics that show that even in executive boards, there's like around 75% of women in executive boards still feel this imposter syndrome. So I think it's somewhat too frequent for women to feel it. So yeah.
Right. So, Gisela, you are leading projects and teams through the scope of new, strongly tied with external stakeholders by managing national and European funded projects. Would you like to frame what it's like to be a woman in STEM today and at EDP and at a leader level like you are?
Sure. Actually, I like to argue that woman in STEM is the same of man in STEM. So I mean, women work in science, technology, engineering, mathematics like everybody else. So our role is not different from men working in STEM. We have the same capabilities to perform the tasks. We have the same responsibilities. We have the same training opportunities. Well, of course, we are not talking about developing countries where maybe there are some constraints for women to nowadays to go to school or to have a career. But I mean, in general terms, it's the same, right? So for me, actually, it's a little bit sad and a bit frustrating to see that in 2023, we are still asking questions like this. It means that there are still places where women are not treated equally by their managers or colleagues. So there is still a lot of to be done in order to change these backward-looking mindsets. There is a different question related with the representation of women working in STEM. And there could be a number of different reasons for this. For instance, it has to do with historical facts that several years ago, for instance, women stay at home instead of going to school or only receive training for specific tasks or courses that were more associated with female activities. And in case of EDP, for instance, it's very clear. We still have a higher representation of men globally, linked with the fact that historically our business were more oriented to male because they were more prepared. They were more targeted to do such tasks. But I mean, it's necessary to say that we are overcoming this, and we have already a lot of initiatives at EDP in order to overcome and to have more female representation. And I think this scenario has been changing. And I can give you, for instance, very briefly, my personal experience here at EDP, starting with my recruiting process. So the first step was by that time to perform some tests with an external consultant, and we were organized in several groups, and we need to go there to do the tests. It was very nice to see that in my group we were only girls applying for a position of an R&D engineer at EDP. So it was very nice to see that back in 2015, that group was composed only by girls. So it was very nice. Then I started working at EDP in different European projects, as you said, having with a higher range of external partners from different fields. So not only science, not only energy, so from different countries. And actually, women and men are together working with no issues related with their gender for achieving the common goals of the project. So I never felt over these years in these European projects any discriminatory behavior, I would say. But well, sometimes it happened. But
as I said, you are dealing on a daily basis with the European teams, and then you work at the EDP at the same time. Talking about equality, do you feel any kind of difference between our internal environment, for example, and for example, the environment at the European level, talking about European teams?
No, I don't. Actually, I don't. I have experienced one or two situations, but to be honest, they were not that important for me. Also because I'm very, as I said in the beginning, I have my my drivers, I have my beliefs, and I'm comfortable with it. So for me, I can overcome them very, very easily. And just to finish my my answer, so as you said, also I'm currently responsible for one of the technical areas at GDP New. And to be honest, I truly believe that I was chosen because of my hard working and competence, and not because I am a woman. And I feel that my peers treat me like they treat everybody. So there's no difference. There's no discriminatory attitudes from their side because I'm a woman. It's equal. It's the same.
Right. And studies show us key factors about gender STEM gaps, like gender stereotypes, male dominant cultures, few women role models, or even math anxiety. What is your opinion about mechanisms like, for example, quotas in Portuguese? Uh, is it necessary or is it unfair? How do you face it? This type of imposed mechanisms to try to achieve the gender equality.
Okay, quotas. Yes, let's speak about quotas. I feel that that is like the $1 million issue that we always go to when it comes to gender equality, and I understand why it could be perceived that as controversial. So my personal opinion on quotas, and I would actually really like to hear every opinion here from my colleagues as well. But my personal opinion is that quotas are kind of an uncomfortable necessity right now. But maybe, I don't know, Bernardo, if you have some definition on quotas. I knew that this question would appear, so I actually went to research on a definition of gender quotas, which I found very interesting.
Better than me. So
yes,
please.
I did. So the European, I have it written here, the European Institute of Gender Equality say that gender quotas are positive measurement instruments aimed at accelerating the achievement of gender balanced participation and representation by establishing a defined percentage of places to be filled by both genders. And focus here on the both genders. I think this is an important detail. But why do I feel that quotas are uncomfortable but necessary? Looking at the numbers and some of the numbers that you also presented in the beginning. And also, for example, we know that the percentage of women in the STEM workforce right now is around 12%. The percentage of women in executive boards of corporations, it's less than 30%. I think it's around 25%. So I feel that it's kind of obvious why we need better gender equality, because we have these numbers, but bear in mind that women are not a minority. Like we tend to see people and see women as minorities, but we know that the human race, we kind of divide in the gender spectrum. We kind of divide more 50% into women, into people who identify as women, and 50% in people who identify as male. And so it's funny to me to think that when we have a population that divides itself in 50%, and given that we had already like millions of years of evolution and hundreds of years of contemporary and modern evolution, why is it that we have certain areas that don't have 50% representation? I think even mathematically, it's interesting to think about that, because if you have a population that spreads randomly, if you go to some other place, like if they come from the same place and you go to some other place, you should have mathematically 50% representation, but you don't. And in STEM, you only have 12%. So my conclusion on this, and relating it to quotas, is that we don't come from the same place, both of these things. And so I think we should all acknowledge, and it's just by looking at the numbers, it's very obvious that there are unconscious bias and there are structural and systemic inequalities or differences that we need to work on. And obviously we could spend like 2 hours here discussing where those inequalities come from. I think that's a whole another discussion, but the thing is that they exist right now. And so if we want diverse corporations, and we acknowledge that there is these biases, these inequalities that we need to overcome, then the conclusion, and again, if we want diverse companies, which I think we do, I think research already shows that diverse corporations do better. But if we want to overcome these biases, then we need to actually make proactive and deliberate choices. And I think that's where quotas come in handy, because quotas are a deliberate choice of putting both genders in equal participation in a place. So thus, I think quotas are necessary. They help us, for example, overcome what is called the conformity bias. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the conformity bias is basically a bias that we all have, which kind of leads us into being surrounded by people that look like us. So if I'm a white woman, I will tend to be surrounded by white women. And this happens a lot, for example, in hiring positions, people tend to hire people who look like them physically. This biologically, it makes sense, but in the modern world, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So quotas help us to overcome this conformity bias. They help us increase role models. So in the video that we saw in the beginning, we saw how important it is to have role models. Quotas help in this. So yeah, all in all, looking at the numbers, if we want to have diverse corporations, I think it's obvious that quotas are necessary. Now, are they unfair? I think that's a lot of that's an argument that I hear a lot, that quotas are unfair. But I think we have the illusion that quotas are unfair because in our day-to-day, we tend to forget that society is already unfair. So we have already seen that we are not coming from the same place. And so quotas are kind of a balancing mechanism to contradict the unfairness that exists in society as a whole. So yeah, the conclusion, I don't know. I would like to hear opinions
let's
on
pass
this.
the words
actually.
to Faye.
Yeah,
Faye,
please.
what about you, quotas? Give us your opinion how you face this strategy. In the end, is a strategy to embrace equity.
Yeah, thanks, Bernardo. You probably saw me nodding along with Anna's answers because I personally agree with everything that she's shared, and I really like the way that she packaged that message. I think I completely agree. The challenge is that society is already set up as unfair, and so I personally also think that quotas are an uncomfortable necessity, as Anna put it, right? I think what comes to mind for me is when we look at specifics, right? And for example, when we're hiring, we're evaluating one candidate versus the other. But in my personal experience, what tends to happen is there's overt biases and then there's unconscious biases that play into the decision making. Overt biases would be, I think conformity bias can be considered an overt bias. It's something that you can recognize, that you can acknowledge. Unconscious biases, these are biases that influence us unconsciously. So because of the way we've grown up, because of the different societal and cultural values, these are things that influence our decision making in a way that we are not often aware of. For me, the way I've experienced this is when I have interviewed for roles or when I speak in meetings, a lot of the times if I haven't met the people in the room, it takes me longer to gain trust or to come off as credible than a male colleague. And I think that's often where women struggle is we have maybe the same education, we have the same skill set, maybe sometimes an even stronger skill set, but there's something in society that makes us less credible or it takes us longer to prove ourselves. And so things like quotas help combat these biases. I think like when we compare one to one, right, one candidate versus the other, sometimes we lose focus of the fact that there are biases when we evaluate one person versus the other, and that quota helps balance things out.
Mm-hmm. Changing from quotas to social stigmas, and returning to you because I would like also to address the generations question here in our talk about equity. And what about the social stigmas to have younger generations being represented in management positions? And you can relate it with women, of course. What do you think about this?
Mm-hmm. I think we tend to think that young people have less experience, which isn't necessarily the case. So fewer years of existence doesn't mean necessarily fewer years of experience in a certain field. And actually, it always depends on the environment you're brought up in, also your personality, also your career choices. So I was having this conversation or a similar conversation with a female engineer from EDP Produção some weeks ago, actually, and she was commenting that in the field of hydropower, there's a lot of need for experienced people right now. And then I was thinking about this. Okay, there's the need of experienced people. Does this mean that we need older people in hydropower? And that's not necessarily the truth, because even in my 26 years of experience, maybe I could have done like a master focused on hydropower. I could have studied hydropower, and I could have done maybe started a PhD or done several internships in this particular topic. Whereas maybe someone who's 40 years old and is working in wind power or wind generation, and if you had to hire for a hydropower position, these two people, a 26-year-old with, let's say, 5 years of experience in internships in hydropower, or a 40-year-old man or whatever, 40-year-old person who doesn't have any experience in hydropower, which one would you choose? I think it's the younger person, because she has more experience in hydropowers in particular. So I just wanted to say this: it's not necessarily connected, experience and age. And in management positions in particular, I think it makes a lot of sense that we have young people in management positions because, I mean, if we want to make decisions for the future, it's obvious that you need people who are going to live that future. So if you want to make good choices for 10 years time, you can have only people who are like 80 years old, because you never know if you're going to live those 10 years, whilst the people who are younger will be there. So to make good choices in management positions, I think you need people who will live in the future that you're managing, basically.
Hi, returning to you, some research raises what so-called confidence gap, like women and men's brains are different for the analytics, for example. But on the other hand, research shows no innate cognitive biological differences between men and women. Have you experienced this type of stigma too? Would you like to share with us how has been your professional journey, and which do you consider to be good and useful practices to succeed as a woman in STEM?
Yeah,
So like
sure.
two type of questions in one question.
2 questions. Yeah, maybe I'll address the first one, just around I think the myth around the analytical brain.
Mhm.
I think, yes, it is a myth, and I think that even though it is a myth, it still impacts the way that we interact as a society. And I think that this ties back to kind of my concept around unconscious and conscious biases, right? Even though we know that it's a myth, I think there are still cultural practices that uphold or that play into this myth. For example, right, women, I think it takes longer for women to develop credibility. The unconscious piece is, okay, in order to assure that this woman is credible and has skills, I need her to demonstrate clearly X, Y, and Z. Versus a male colleague, they show up, they have the title, they have the position, they speak with authority, and people tend to believe them. That means there's fewer challenges, right? I mean, I've been asked, are you sure about that? Can you go back and double check? I've even been in, here at EDPR, I've been in situations where I will present an answer and then the receiving party will say, okay, let me go double check with this male colleague. And so I think these types of behaviors are coming from unconscious biases that stem from these pervasive myths that shape how we act and how we interact in society. In order to combat that, for me personally, I think one, unfortunately, we have to acknowledge that these things exist. And for me, and I think a lot of the women here in the forum have shared, right? It's about being able to work through these challenges. For me, it's been, okay, maybe it takes me longer. So I mentally prepare. How do I demonstrate that I have these skills? I know it's going to take a while to gain that credibility. The second thing for me is, if I'm interested in a project, or if I want to grow a certain skill set, I've gotten into this habit of working on it without asking for permission. I think that often is the challenge, is the way that leadership is built up is sometimes we wait to be given the opportunity. But as females, I think we have to look for those opportunities ourselves to demonstrate that we have those skills. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know what you're doing, right? That's how we all grow. But for me, it's finding the confidence in myself to say, okay, who are the mentors within my circle who will rally for me, who will help coach me, so that as I try to grow into these skills, I have a safe space to learn. And then once I have this skill, then I see people find me more credible. And I think that's something I would encourage kind of other females and younger generations to really look at, is how do you kind of lead the way for yourself and not wait for the opportunities for you to be invited, but instead for you to seek out the opportunities yourselves and find these mentors that are across both genders to help mentor and coach you. Because yes, I think women have to stand up for women, but there's 50% of the male society, right? And I think those are very strong allies and advocates that we have to come together and be able to to utilize to all grow together.
So I have Mariana. Mariana, now about you and about your personal experience. Mariana, you are probably the one here who works in a more technical and operational context. Would you like to explain what do you do and what challenge do you find of being a woman in such a technical, operational scope and environment?
Yeah, sure. I've been working as an engineer for almost three years, and I'm not going to lie here. In the more technical context, we still find that most of the field is occupied by men, especially working with electricity. But my experience resides in strategic planning. So I have to understand the mind of the people that are working on the field on a daily basis to be able to improve the process and what they are doing. So a couple years back, I thought it would be harder than it is because I had to be in contact with an environment that I don't know, that's mostly men, especially in leadership positions. So at first I was really afraid. I was afraid of my I have doubts about my abilities, but honestly, on these 3 years, I have been developing my relationships with all people, and I see the world is getting better at this point, and we have, I think, we have a better path for women in this career like mine in the next couple of years. So that's my experience.
Okay, your hope too. So going to the future ahead and going to Gisela Mendes on this roundtable, if this talk happens like 10 years from now, what would you like to see different, Gisela?
Well, to be very honest,
Not have this talk. It's your opinion.
and for starters, yeah, I hope this talk won't happen in 10 years. Because I mean, if it happens, it means that we still feel the need to discuss the role of women in STEM, and we still need to find mechanisms to overcome and justify situations that constrains women to work on whatever career they want, not only STEM, but in whatever career they want to pursue. So this will be very, very sad to see this talk in 10 years. It will mean that in 10 years we're not capable of changing mindsets and discriminatory situations against women. We're not able to create the same opportunities, the same tools for women to pursue what they would like to do in their careers. And so I would say that also related with the quotas that we were talking earlier. So my opinion is that I tend to disagree to them, actually, because we may need quotas forever if we don't identify very clearly the reason why we still have this unbalanced representation between men and women. So we need to identify this and find solutions to overcome this. And I mean, that's why I think quotas could be an artificial way to promote the equality. But I mean, we need to solve the reasons why behind this, and not try to, to put a mask on it, let's say, just to talk a bit about the previous question. So asking your second question, so my advice for the next generation of women in STEM and all generations in women of women in general, is that please do not give up of your dreams, of your beliefs, of your purpose, of fighting against discriminatory situations. please have the courage to report whatever make you feel uncomfortable with in your life, either in professional or personal context. So be strong. Please go for it. Do your best, and you will be succeeded. And I mean, if something happens in your journey, sorry, that makes you doubt because you are a woman, stay calm and be positive that you are doing the right thing. They don't, but you are.
But Faye, everyone, men and women, can be an ally for gender equality. So what all of us should do on our daily life, how can we pursue this topic and be an ambassador of gender equality?
I think it's a great question. I think for me, and also kind of thinking about the 10 years question, right? I would love to flip the narrative instead of asking women, what should we do differently? I really think that there's an opportunity for us to ask our allies and the other gender to say, what can our male colleagues or what can the other half of society do to make it, to reduce some of the barriers that we've talked about? I think it's on all of us, right, to overcome these barriers and to find equality. I'll just share one more personal story and then to kind of, I guess, to narrate the experiences that I've personally had. But you know, I've been working for almost 10 years now, and I've been at EDPR for a year and a half. And just last year, I had a situation where we had a supplier come visit in a meeting room. Excuse me, in a meeting room, I was the only female representing EDPR, and halfway through the meeting, the visitor turned his whole body to me and said, "Faye, can you please go get us some coffee?" And I think it was a very clear example of where unconscious biases or maybe overt biases play in, right? I was there as the senior associate representing procurement, but for whatever reason, that person felt that it was appropriate to ask me in a room full of his peers to go get him coffee. And I personally was so shocked. I didn't know how to respond. And I was very grateful for a male colleague on the other side of the table. He stood up and said, you know, I can do that for you. You know, you guys are having a conversation. I'm not actively participating. And I think that's a very clear example of these are opportunities where we really need our allies to step in, either because in the moment, right, I was too shocked to respond. And I also think it may not have been appropriate for me to respond in the way that I would have wanted. And so kind of, yeah, flipping the narrative and having our male colleagues also step in and challenge their own biases and say, what can we do differently? How can we respond differently? Is really the only way we're going to make progress in this space.
Thanks for sharing that story with us and that experience, Faye. Anna, with you and according to your vision, this equity brings benefits to the organizations, and to have women in STEM in equity mode brings benefits too. So how these benefits can really impact an organization and bring benefits to all of us?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious for us when we see the working of organizations to realize what are the benefits of having gender diversity, but also all kinds of diversity. So first of all, what is obvious is that if you're a company trying to sell something, then you need to know and you need to be able to represent and to work with your customers, your clients. And for that, you need to be as diverse as your clients. So for example, for a company such as EDP, we are literally working for almost everyone. And so we need to know, we need to be able to think as our customers do. So we need to be diverse on the inside as well. Then also, we were talking about management a while ago and diversity in management. I think it's very important for a leadership team to be diverse, because you also need to know what your employees, your collaborators, your colleagues are feeling. So to be able to lead effectively, you need to be as diverse as the team you're leading. And then also, speaking of gender diversity in particular, like, I don't know, what comes to my mind is that women have different ways of organizing. So maybe most of us are more organized. That could be a benefit. Also, we are able to provide more empathetic leadership. And I think that's also important, that we are more empathetic when leading people. I mean, if you have a more diverse team, you can come up with more diverse solutions, diverse projects, just for the fact that you have diverse experiences coming into place. And also, and now I'm remembering a very funny example where women are very necessary, because I don't know if you've heard of this, but there was one of the first couple of times that NASA tried to send a woman to space. They sent Sally Ride to space, and they were going to send 100 tampons, like, menstrual tampons, with her, 100, and she was going for 1 week. And every woman here is like, yeah, we don't need 100 tampons for 5 days ever. So just this kind of stupid mistakes that maybe could happen, just having a female there could prevent them from happening. So I think it's pretty obvious why we need diversity of every type, actually. Um, Maybe if I could just also go back to the question of the 10 years from now, because there was a really good comment here on the chat from Isabel saying 10 years is not a long time in the 136 years gap. And that was exactly what I was thinking. Because although I agree with Gisela, I wished that in 10 years we didn't have to have this conversation. I think it's very likely that we will still be having this conversation. And I think this diversity challenge is a marathon. It's not something that's going to happen in the next 10 years. We're not going to achieve gender equality, but we need to keep pushing for it.
Okay, it has been a great session. We have like 2 minutes left. So call to action to all our attendees. This is the time to address the questions to our girls here today, to our now we just have the three of you, because Mariana has to leave the session, but it's the time to address them, the questions you have about women in STEM. So please be dynamic as your comments during the session, because a great discussion here, a very dynamic discussion, but bring us and bring also your questions to our women in STEM today. So question 1 from Miguel Jorge Marques, okay? And I don't know which one of you would like to answer that, but okay, I'm going to make the question to the three of you. So Miguel is asking, looking ahead, in which direction we are heading in gender balance in STEM? Meaning, do we see already more women as university students in STEM getting in the labor market in the medium term?
Maybe I can take this.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I think the scenario is changing, and women start to appear more frequently. I gave you before my example of the recruiting process, where I was competing actually with only girls, so it was very nice. But giving, for instance, the example of EDP New, when I start working here, for a long period of time, I was the only girl in the team. And now we have more or less 30% of women here. And still, the majority are boys. We are now recruiting a lot of people for our team, and the majority of the applications are still from male. But there are already a lot of, not a lot, but some applications from women. So I mean, it's a path, as Anna was saying. So it's not a sprint. But I mean, I think we are on the right path. It will take probably more than 10 years, but I see more women nowadays in STEM than some years ago. At least it's my feeling.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think we just have like one final question, and it will be the last one, from Marta Monteiro, and is a question to Faye. So Faye, you already shared a story saying Marta Monteiro, that happened in your path. Sorry, Faye shared the story. So the question is, Anna and Gisela, could you share a similar professional story as Faye did? Do you have any kind of these stories showing the unconscious bias that we're still having in our society?
Yeah, maybe already in the university. As and I also study at IST in physics. So imagine a lot of boys, just a few girls, and from some of our professors, I felt that they, come on, you are a girl. I'm not losing my time with you. A lot of biased behavior from some of the professors that I had at IST. They doubt about our competences, about our skills. I mean, sometimes it was very clear. They spend more time explaining to my colleagues, my male colleagues, than losing time with girls. And on a professional context, yeah, I have one or two situations where my manager said, "Yeah, you are going to do this task because it's a woman thing." So I mean, but I mean, as I said, I think the guy is wrong, and it's a shot. I mean, he was doing something that is not appropriate. It's unacceptable. Someone telling this to a colleague. So I still keep with my thoughts that I was doing the right thing, and it was the one that was wrong.
Of course. Thanks, Gisela. And just to end up the session, your story, if you have some.
Yeah, actually, in my professional life, which has been basically at EDP, I haven't felt it directly, but I immediately remembered also a particular situation in Technico in my university. So basically, we had to do a programming project, and I was working. The group was just me and a male colleague, and for some reason it was kind of a like hardcore programming courses, so it was a difficult thing, a typical male thing, let's say. But for some reason my colleague, I don't remember why, but he couldn't help me, so I was, the whole semester I was working on it. I did all the code, I passed all the tests and everything, and then we had to do an oral presentation of the code and all of it working to the professor. And I remember to be sitting there doing the presentation, explaining the code, and my colleague was like just saying stuff that I told him to also say. And I remember that the professor only asked questions to my colleague, and like he wanted to know what we did, and he would ask him. He wanted to know how we worked. He would ask him, and never me. And I always felt that it was like, okay, like, you know, I kind of did all the work, and he's just speaking to my colleague because he thought he did the work, because he actually looked like a typical programming boy, you know. So I think he thought that I didn't do the project. So this is a very particular situation, but I also don't think it's the norm now. And to answer the question of Miguel, I actually think that we're going on the right path, but I want to finish also with again saying that we have to keep pushing for it. We have to keep pushing for gender equality, because it's a marathon. It's not going to happen in the next few years.
Thanks a lot, the four of you, to share your thoughts, your experience, your vision, and how can we change our organization, and the world around us. Thanks everyone who joined us today. It was a pleasure to be here in this talk, with this conversation with you, from Brazil to US to Portugal, a very diverse and rich conversation. And I just hope this talk change something in our path to embrace equity. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have just reached, and I guess we still have two comments here on the chat. We hope to answer it maybe offline, as we already just reached the end of our event. So thank you everyone for your active participation. If you are also curious or wanted to know more about EDP investment in diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging topics, and specifically on gender diversity and equity, please visit our website. And the plan for gender equality, which is also available publicly in the website. And I have just left the links on the chat. And so thank you so much. And back to you, Ines.
Thank you, Luciana. Thank you all. To finish, we just want to share with you that the next R&D session powered by New will continue on next month, so with new topics on the energy sector. We are happy to invite you to continue to follow these webinars. So stay tuned. Enjoy your afternoon.